And then I would like to ask you for just a moment of silence. We have some folks in Florida that are going through a pretty rough time right now with a school shooting. We don't have all the details, but I thought we could have a little short moment of silence after the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Short memories there, I guess.
Okay, now if I could have the reading of the mission and the vision, please.
Richmond Community Schools guides students on pathways of learning to a future of limitless possibilities.
Thank you, Brad. And the
Vision statement. Richmond Community Schools, a community nurturing mind, body, and spirit to prepare students for life of choice, purpose, and service.
Thank you. And we have our first segment of public commentary. I don't see publics.
There was someone.
Yeah, we had.
They didn't sign in, though.
Oh, okay. All right. And then before we get into the rest of the agenda, I had a little bit of confusion on the agenda, but under board reports, I want to add a 6.02 so that we can have discussion on the bus replacement, all that information that you got in your in the update. And then there's also information at your desk. It just didn't get on the agenda, but our intention was to have that conversation today. So appreciate that. First, then, are our consent items.
So our consent items this evening for your consideration are approval of minutes, including the from last time, and then the 3.02, the human resources, including the addendum at your desktop. 3.03, the administrative consultant and substitute services agreement as well.
Do I have a motion to accept the consent items as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Jeff.
second.
Second by Debbie. Any comments or questions? Hearing none. All those in favor of accepting the consent items as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Now we can go to our action.
So the first action item this evening is 4.01 policies. And before I ask Mrs. Darengowski to lead the discussion on this one, Mr. Tidrow has one thing that he would like to bring to your attention.
Right. In the food services policy 7500, there's a section in the towards the end of the document that talks about not serve any food service area during meal serving hours. There's a item there that's listed as carbonated beverages. We do serve carbonated beverages if they meet smart snack compliancy. And these are 0 calorie, no artificial flavors, and of course no sugar. So, but we do serve those in the high school a la carte. So
The carbonation isn't the deal breaker, it's the other
correct,
stuff.
it's the sugars and the
I got you.
artificial sweeteners. So,
Okay, so.
but they do meet the smart snack compliancy
Gotcha.
put out by the federal government.
Okay, so the question is, do we, because we move these to second reading as a group, so I would like to call for a motion with the noted change to adopt these as a group as well.
So moved.
Got a motion by Debbie, do I have a second? Second by Dixie. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor of moving these policies to adoption signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. We have policy 7661.
Okay, this is the policy regarding alcohol and controlled substance testing policy for commercial driver's licenses. Those with CDLs, our employees there. Open it up for any questions or comments at this time.
Does that also apply to Sandro?
Or do they have their own set of, since they're contracted out, do they have their own set of?
Yeah, it's, yes, there's a whole process of, they're required and then random after that.
So it applies to all of our subcontractors then? You understand my
Yes.
question?
No, I get what you're saying, yes.
Rob, this is your area, so.
I wouldn't, I mean, talking about all subcontractors, would it be vendors as well?
Well, what I'm asking, I mean, Sodrel
Specifically the,
is really a subcontractor, classified as a subcontractor, right? So it would be hard to impose something on them
yeah,
Right.
that we don't impose on other subcontractors.
yeah, this is,
I would think so. We use a lot of vendors, which I would consider subs, so. So I don't,
Yeah,
it'd be hard to manage that.
that's a good question.
I believe this is for our own people with CDLs, like RCS employees. But if you want to pull it, we can double check to be sure.
Right.
Well, I'm actually just looking for clarity.
I get it. There's a,
Then I had a question too on the wording, where transportation director is crossed out and it says COO. Should that be, it reads right now, the superintendent, chief operations officer, no comma, no or. How's that, is that worded correctly?
yeah, I see what it says. I see what you're saying. You're right. I missed that.
Should it
Says
say
it twice.
and or?
And or.
Yeah.
Should it at least be and?
I suggest we pull it and get
Authorize.
clarity and then revise it and come back next meeting.
We can do that.
I think all you
Focus
need's
on
or.
Yeah.
OR.
Well, that'll give us an opportunity,
It
because,
actually, it goes
and then-
in those brackets.
what's that?
Okay, it
The
goes
chief
into those
operations
brackets.
will
Yeah,
go.
see, we're crossing
okay.
that out
Oh,
now,
I
so
see
it
what
goes
you're
in the
saying.
bracket.
I see what
That's
you're
why
saying.
there's no comma.
Gotcha. It's in the brackets on purpose. That's not just because I get you. That makes sense.
And the title concludes with employees, so that seems.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yep, I think we're good then.
I would assume it was just for employees,
That's what
RCS
I
employees,
thought
opposed
as
to
well.
vendors, but, or subcontractors.
That's what I
even though
thought as
they're
well. It was our,
Contractors would have their own.
That's what
Our
I
own
read in here,
CDL.
but I don't know where I read it.
And I would suggest taking it out of the brackets and putting or after superintendent.
well, but I think
But that's just,
that's signifying the designee, so it's the superintendent designee, but if we,
It doesn't really matter. I mean, if you guys would feel better with that, we
Yeah.
definitely can.
okay.
I would assume then that Sodrel does have their own standing policy for their
Absolutely.
employees.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Well,
We
I'm-
have that information?
I'm good with that. I mean,
Not
if-
today, but
No,
I
no, no,
can get
I'm
it
just
to you.
saying, we do have
Absolutely.
that, and
Mhm.
it does state, because I wouldn't want anybody like that with
Live it every
kids.
day. Yeah,
Okay.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. This is employees with those changes. Do I have a motion to move this to second reading?
I'll motion to move to second reading.
There's still questions.
I'm just gonna ask one more question.
Yeah, sure.
This may be stupid. If, I know the policy is for Sodrel, if a bus driver has an accident, then they immediately get blood tested.
That's not a
That's
Sodrel, that's state.
The state.
Is that state? Okay, I will say because in here, this policy says we have the right to, it actually spells out, we have the right to have employees take. So we're completely 100% covered there. Okay.
So, but we're covered by our employees, right? But the subcontractors, does that cover them too? I mean, is that what I hear you saying too?
The state-
This
Contractors
policy
will-
does not.
Yeah, state law requires if anybody with a CDL is in an accident, that there's a blood draw.
I
Not
guess I'm
any
just-
accident, but anything with injuries,
Correct.
fatalities, or.
I know, I hear you saying that, but do they do random drug tests as well?
Yes,
And that's written somewhere?
yes.
In the Sodrel policies.
Okay, which we don't have access to.
Not tonight.
Not tonight, not tonight, but
Get it.
when.
We can get it. If you
Yeah.
guys want
No,
the
no,
Sodrel
no,
policy.
no,
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
I
This
just want to
is-
understand.
This is regulated, okay?
Yes,
And
it's
we-
quite
We're not just
regulated.
making this up and flying by the seat of our pants.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Obviously,
quite
as
regulated.
President Darengowski is correct, we do not have direct authority over the contracted bus drivers that are employees of Sodrel or Student Transit or whatever the current entity is. However, they have the same overarching CDL Class
Department of
A
Transportation.
requirements, as well as the federal drug regs that apply to them, post-accident, random sampling.
All the Department of Transportation
All of
laws are
them, yeah.
apply,
So-
so.
Now, our contract, and I don't have it in front of me, but I do believe our contract incorporates this requirement as one of the metrics that we require that they comply with.
And there's random testing quarterly, so.
I'm good with it then.
Okay. So I need a motion to move this to second reading with the edits as provided.
I'll second the motion.
Oh, that-
Motion.
Who made the motion?
Brad.
Brad, okay. Motion by Brad, second by Aaron. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, our next action item this evening is 4.03, and that is the conflict of interest statements. And I'm going to ask Mrs. O'Brien if she would speak to this, please.
Attached in board docs before you are the yearly updated conflict of interest statements. And at this time, I'm asking that the school board approve the following action.
I move that we accept all these conflict of interest statements.
Second.
Motion by Jeff, second by Aaron. Any comments or questions? Do you want to explain that just a little? Jennifer, I mean, I know it's,
It's not rocket science.
By law, yearly, we're required just to disclose any conflicts that someone may
Potential.
have. Right. It could be in terms of owning a business or place of employment that may conflict with RCS business.
very good. Do we already have a
And-
motion?
Just for the
Please, I
sake of
appreciate it.
everybody's perspective, I can assure you that we're over-disclosing that
Exactly.
most of these that are listed are not really within the purview of the cited statute, but for the trouble that it takes the office to prepare them and for us to sign them, and in the interest of transparency, I don't think anyone's advocated a different approach in the past, and I certainly don't now.
Yeah, but anything that could be perceived, even minimally, as a conflict has been reported, so. Okay, do I have a motion? Did I already get a motion? Okay.
I made a motion.
Dix, you did?
You did.
Okay.
Yeah, I moved it, and then somebody
I
seconded.
seconded.
Okay.
Okay, never
For the
mind.
conflict of interest already? Okay, sorry, I thought I was repeating myself. Motion by Jeff, second by Aaron. Any further questions? There is not. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Very good, okay.
All right, our next action item this evening is 4.04, the request to advertise RFP for third grade academy. I'm going to ask Dr. Reynolds if he'd speak to this, please.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Terrell. Attached, you'll find the complete RFP for the third grade reading academy. I'm recommending that RCS advertise this RFP beginning February 16th, 2018. We'll receive the request for proposals for a third grade summer reading academy up to 2 p.m. on March 5th, 2018 at the school administration building. Academy students will include exiting third graders who do not demonstrate grade level reading proficiency as measured by iRead3 in the 2018 exam. Academy students may also include exiting second graders who did not demonstrate grade level reading proficiency. As always, the number of second graders will depend on the number of third graders that will need to, that did not pass the iRead3. All proposals must be submitted with a non-collusion affidavit properly signed and executed and filed with myself for the Richmond Community Schools. Facsimile delivered responses will not be accepted. All proposals must be made in compliance with laws governing such matters, and the board reserves the right to reject any and all proposals or to accept the lowest responsible or responsive one, not necessarily necessarily the low bid. Detailed specifications and procedures may be picked up at the School Administration Building here at 300 Hub Etchison Parkway. I'm asking tonight for the permission to advertise the RFP for third grade reading academy.
Do I have a motion? Motion by Dixie Robinson,
I'll second.
second by Brad Walton. Any further comments or questions? All right, all those in favor of approving the request to advertise for the RFP for third grade academy, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right.
Our last action item this evening is 4.05, and that is an overnight field trip. And I'm going to ask Dr. Reynolds if he would speak to this as well.
Yes, I'm asking or recommending the approval for an overnight field trip for our service learning kids. If you recall, last year we started a service learning course at the high school. We're kind of seeing the fruits of a lot of folks' hard work already. This is an alternative to violence conference. It's a student conference in Memphis, Tennessee. All funds have been covered through donations and sponsorships for that group. I'm asking that you approve the all service learning facilitators and those students to depart on February 22nd and return on February 25th. To Memphis, Tennessee. I'm sorry, excuse me.
Do I?
I'm not gonna do it.
Do I have a motion
Dixie's working on John.
to approve the overnight field trip for the service learning students?
Go ahead.
Motion by Aaron Stevens. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Dixie Robinson. Any further questions about that? Jeff?
do have
Oh, sorry.
question.
I saw him first.
Go ahead.
I noticed it's just one chaperone and just 3 students. I know we typically like to have more than one adult with a group of students at a time. I didn't know whether that would be an issue or not.
How many students are you expecting, Chuck?
We've done it in
This is 3.
3 students.
we've
Oh,
done
their
it,
leaderships.
we've done it in the past with Skills USA, going to nationals with just one advisor with multiple kids.
Should be. an issue.
As long as it's usually, as long as it's a decent ratio.
Well, it's nice that it's free, and I think it's a great experience for our kids, and I wish our whole school system could go. I think it would be a good program.
Aaron.
Meeting tomorrow?
Mr. Reynolds?
Yes.
What was the total cost of the package with? Do you know?
I do not know. Mrs. Wolpe, I did not get that from her.
But they're going because monies were donated. That's outstanding.
Well, and these are the leaders of the group, right? That's how I read it, right? Facilitators, basically. So that's awesome. Very nice. All those in favor of approving this trip signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Very nice. We have had some meetings in our master plan sequence, and we're going to little update, but hopefully we're not going to do a lot of discussing, right? Because we
Correct.
still have a bunch of meetings left to go, and I don't want to preempt that.
Yeah. So what I want to do is just let you know the meetings that we have had to date. On February 1st, we met with all of the employees in the operations department here in the boardroom. Standing room only, brought in extra chairs. It was a very good meeting. And then a week later, on February 8th, we met with food services employees here. Also had a meeting with the preschool staff because our preschool staff are not able to attend during the normal PD time that all of you were a part of at the elementary buildings because they still have children at that time. So they are with their students, so we had a special one for them. And then coming up on the 20th of February, we will have a meeting with the central office staff here as well as secretaries. We also met last week with the SROs. So I believe that we have hit just about, or have planned to hit just about every employee group that we have as well. And then you all obviously are aware of our meetings with our elementary teachers on the 6th of February, and then yesterday with our secondary buildings, along with Hibbard and CYS. So just letting you know that those meetings are going well. As soon as we get minutes from those meetings, as soon as Kim can compile all of them, we've been posting those on the website as well. So you can go there and check up on all of those minutes. Again, we're trying to just be as transparent as we can, putting all that information out there together. Want to let you know, as of 4 p.m. today, update on the number of surveys that have been taken. Preparation for the surveys, we've mentioned it multiple times. I've heard it on the radio stations in town, and we appreciate that. Have seen it. We tweeted it out, put it on Facebook, Instagram. It's posted on our website. To this point, at 4 p.m. today, 71 individuals had taken the elementary schools survey, 47 had taken the intermediate school survey, 25 had taken the high school survey, and 57 had taken the grade configuration survey. I have no idea what those results are, I just know how many people have taken it up to this point in time. So we've had 200 surveys taken to date. Posted it Friday at about 3, Kim, do you think that's when we made it?
About
Something like that?
2:33, yeah.
So we'll continue to push that, and hopefully we'll get even more participants with our surveys as well.
Most of you have commented that the meetings seemed rather productive. I wished that the high school meeting we had more time. So I hope that those teachers involved there maybe will come to community meeting, because the time was fairly constrained. We didn't get to have as much discussion as I would have liked, but
Dr.
other
Rose, you
than
want
that,
to
I thought it
speak
was good.
to one of the ways we're addressing that with Padlet?
Yeah, we left Padlet open where we collected all the input
Oh,
from,
You might
okay.
from teachers.
explain Padlet?
Padlet is really a digital version of those big poster boards that we used. You could put, we had them divided up with those different subheadings: exceptional education, alternative education, so forth, about big program ideas. And then we had big Post-it notes, digital Post-it notes in there, and teachers could add, staff could add what they thought were our successes, where were our areas of growth, and programs they would like to see, or changes they would like to see in programming. So we collected data that way, so maybe even get more participation. Some folks that don't
No,
want to
that's
necessarily
good.
speak up, they could just put their comments in that Padlet with, without speaking up necessarily. But we also told them that we left the Padlet open, so we left it open overnight and all day today and tomorrow morning.
Oh, that's good. That makes me feel
So that
better.
they still have that access. So we sent that email out to different folks today, thanking them for letting us come and use PD time, but then also letting them know that that will be open until tomorrow morning. And it'll still be open, but we're going to start collecting that so we can get it posted
Good.
and get it out to you guys for all the buildings.
Aaron?
So I learned a new word tonight, Padlet.
Padlet.
Okay, next week it'll be something else. It was a smooth transition from thought to thought using that yesterday, I thought. Was that the same format that was used at Test as well as Hibbard and CYS?
Yep.
Okay, so there was the uniformity in it. Okay.
The flip side is we have so much information that, the night that we had our dentist meeting, although we didn't have very many people there, I did have 2 people say, we had so much stuff to cover, there's no way that we could cover it all in the time and really have a lot of conversation. I felt that way. The Padlet was a test yesterday as well, and I felt kind of that way, that as a comparison, I didn't feel like I was able to participate in here. I felt like I was more limited because I had 4 people
At your small group?
at the small group, and there were 50 people in the room. So I don't
Yeah, the
feel-
dentist was a community meeting, these were school meetings, so there's a little bit of difference there
Well,
in
but then
in
if
the
I go back
approach.
and compare it to the Charles meeting, where we didn't use the Padlet, there was a lot more interaction and a lot more discussion.
I would agree with that.
So, from the perspective, maybe this is selfish, but from the perspective of a board member having a feel for the room, I didn't feel like
Harder
I
to get
had
it that way.
I didn't feel like I had the same feel yesterday as I had at Charles.
Yeah.
Plus,
Now-
there's more teachers as well.
Yes, more teachers, definitely. And then we'll hopefully have, when we have an opportunity to see the compilation, maybe I think we'll feel better, because I did get, a sense.
I'll echo Jeff's thoughts on that too. We had a great meeting at the elementary schools. Teachers really shared openly, honestly, the good, the bad, everything else. Where with the Padlet, I do like the idea of keeping it open. That's a great idea to, because you are limited on time. If you don't think of something during that 5-10 minutes that you're working on it, you can go back and add to it. I think that's big, but.
Because their PD time is what, like 35 minutes or something? It's very brief.
But at the same time, not being able to have the discussion with a larger group of teachers where they can feed off of each other and really discuss things was kind of disappointing. And I think what he's going with too was, selfishly, I didn't feel like I got as much out of that. Now, I haven't looked at all the Padlet information yet, and we're probably gonna have a lot more discussion topics on that Padlet, but at the same time, how were those worded? I like to see things in live person and hear how they were said and see how they were said.
Yeah, and that would have been really tough to do. We would have had to all be
I
at
know,
all of the
and-
meetings in order to be in all the
Right.
groups, so
But-
I think maybe we'll feel.
There's advantages and disadvantages to both, but.
I think we'll feel better once we see the results, but I agree, it was a little harder with that many people to, where in the elementaries you were able to put everybody in a room and be able to do that, and just the numbers alone makes that a little harder.
The
We had a
pa-
little more time too.
Yeah, I had a lot more on my Padlet for Dennis. I had a lot more feedback under each heading than I did when I just did successes, areas
Gotcha.
of growth. I had a lot more feedback, but gave everyone had a chance to put something on the board.
So they had time.
As
That
opposed
makes
to
sense too.
Kirsten and I trying to,
That makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but,
that does make
but
sense.
you didn't have that.
It would have been perfect if using that, if it had been 2 hours, or so to speak, or longer, so that
Enough
people
time,
would have been able
yeah.
to really fully engage in that. And I understand that, the Padlet, it was successful yesterday, in my opinion, there at Dennis. However, again, as you're saying, as we stated, it kind of limits that
It was
total
probably the
input.
best tool you could hope for, though, to
Right.
stay
In the
within
amount of
in the
time, yeah.
confines of the PD
And
time.
one thing I really liked about the elementary setting is as we went through the topics, so we started with exceptional education, okay? And Chuck, you did a good job of, at Charles, when someone would bring up a topic, you'd be like, all right, well, let's touch on this and dive into a little, and that would morph into 3 other ideas. To where, with the Padlet, it was like, all right, next topic is exceptional education. Go.
Yeah.
It's like,
I think when we see it, then
you
we'll
know,
have to-
that's the down. It's very non-personal at that point. I think that's maybe one of the big things I
Well,
had with it.
then hopefully we can encourage the secondary teachers to come to the community meetings too.
Yeah, that is
be able
be
to
crucial
share
if they
some.
really want to get into the discussion.
And
it'd be
obviously,
awesome.
keep filling the Padlet.
Sure, sure.
Well, the 2 schools I attended have been noted to be closed, and so that really, I think, clouded the discussion. I mean, that was their number one concern. And the meeting at Star, I thought, was very productive. But I don't know if we're getting exactly what we need through the process. Pretty tight focus on, if I had another pair, I could do this. And where I don't know how we, get to 30,000 feet from where the data we're collecting. And maybe that's asking not the right questions to be asking, but I was also fairly disappointed in the turnout at Dennis. I hope we can have better participation tomorrow night. I'm not sure how to get more people there, but I think with those small groups and just having just a majority of board members, just RCS people, I think I'd love to be outnumbered 3 to 1. I don't know how to make that happen.
Yeah, I would suggest that we all take your social media, your whatever. Bridget has shipped out, you guys have shipped out the schedule, and send it to your circle of influence and just encourage them to come out. That's the best thing I know to do, and I know personal invitations have gone out to lots of groups as well. So just take the opportunity to share that and just say, hey, we really want to hear from you. I think that's the best we can hope to do. I mean, I know you personally invited several different groups in the community.
We've used every venue, avenue
One
possible.
call, I think we've
One
only
calls
done
have
one
gone
call.
out, emails
yeah.
have gone out, social media posts, the paper, the radio stations,
Town crier.
everybody.
Pretty
So,
close, yeah.
Chamber has been pushing it for
That's
us.
right. So, yeah, just keep,
Some of the best data may be the surveys.
The meeting is coming, the meeting is coming.
yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how that comes out. And really, I'm looking forward to the Padlet data too. So if it gets really full, is it no longer qualified as a Padlet? Does it need to become a pad?
Just the
Padlock.
giant, yeah, I don't know, padlock, a padlock.
All right, so, anything else for the good of that cause? Anyway, just when is this isn't live, is it? Tonight? It'll be too late by the
Conversations, I
time.
mean, on the positive side, I mean, the conversations, I mean, people go and they care and they have great ideas. And
Yeah,
I think the struggle is you'd love to incorporate every idea you hear.
right.
And so I appreciate the participation.
And I think we may want to take, it was interesting, especially on the grade reconfiguration. We may want to take some of the data and then we may want to pinpoint maybe a special session or a discussion. It was interesting because there was a 5th grade teacher in my group. And and 5th grade seems to be in that middle.
They're the old 6th graders.
You
Nobody
know,
wants them.
It's interesting, and, so it was interesting hearing a perspective from a 5th grade teacher, because you always hear them from the younger year teachers, or the
before and
older
after,
teachers, and it's interesting, some of the teachers talking about it as parents, how they felt about the 5th grade, so it's going to be interesting to see how all the data comes in, because I don't know if we may want to dig into that one a little deeper.
That would be a bigger deal too. I mean, that's one of those things that's gonna be a big deal, so. Very good. All right, we have the opportunity to have some legislative update.
So, what I'd like to do is start off with our legislative updates and just kind of walk you through some of the latest ones that are coming out. One of the big things I think that we all need to be aware of, I have a list in front of me of like 12 people who are retiring from either the House or the Senate in November. And the most influential for us in education is Senator Dave Long, who is also the pro tem of the Senate, and he's going to be retiring, and he's a great ally for public education. So that's going to be a big hit there, potential hit, depending on who his replacement is. He also then is able to place a member on the State Board of Ed, and right now that person has been one of the 4 votes that went against pushing forward with pathways, one of the 4 votes that continues to be when it comes up to looking at school grades and accountability. So anyway, that's a real concern. But to bring you up to date, and obviously I'd love to hear, I know you guys are all following as well from the emails we're getting from ISBA and the WebExes that they're doing. One of the first one is Senate Bill 65, which is regarding, for lack of better terms, the sex ed bill, where we're looking at what are we doing, and that has really turned it into a opt-in rather than an opt-out bill. What we would suggest with it is we're more than open with what is taught in our buildings, but we'd really like that to be that the parents would have to write a letter to opt out of it. And part of the problem with that is when we come, especially in urban schools where our kids may need it, they need it as much as anybody in the state. Community interaction, parent response is many times difficult to get. And so to have that where they have to actually opt into it makes it a real challenge. Whereas if it was an opt-out, that'd be a little bit more feasible and realistic approach there. So I think something is gonna go through with that. Our biggest push right now, when I say ours, excuse me, from the Urban Schools Association, we have lobbyists that work for us based off of what we feel is in our best interest. And that's the big push we're putting right now, is that they can opt out of it rather than they have to opt into it. So I don't know, Ron, if you've heard anything else with
Actually,
that.
Senate Bill 65 was scheduled at least for hearing today, and I was out of the office all day, and I had an email this morning from Lisa Tanzel wanting to know our response to certain public record requests that have been received by several school districts in this geographical area, and I emailed her back, and so I'll follow up with her tomorrow to see what transpired. I'm like you, I think something's going to come out of it, but you articulated it quite well. I mean, if you're, for cocktail knowledge, so to speak, if you're hit with what's wrong with a parent being able to pull their kid out of a class that they have moral objection to, the answer to that is absolutely nothing. But the reality is that there are a lot of situations, the way this bill has been written, that, as you say, it's an opt-in, and sadly, a lot of students today don't have the parental interest or involvement that would, and they are probably as much as any in need of this type of not necessarily value-driven education, but scientifically driven education.
And similar to that, so last year, following that same lines of how it's hard for us to be able to get responses many times from our parents, last year there was a change that we made in ISTEP where parents are able to appeal the results of ISTEP. So it was that schools could do it for parents, and then it went to no parents had to initiate it. Well, then what they found out was typically the students who need the appeal are typically in urban schools where it's more challenging to get feedback from parents, so they changed that. So the rationale that we're using is just like last year when you changed it to make it more reasonable for our kids, is the exact reason why we're asking this bill to be read the way that Ron just described. So, any other questions on that one? Next one I want to talk about is House Bill 1001, which is also Senate Bill 189. This has to do with the shortfall in the funding. If you guys, and I'm sure you've kept up with that, what we know right now is that there's a $22 million shortfall. It started off being 10, and then it was 12, then it was 15, now it's 22. Basically what that means is there's a million students in the state of Indiana. So if they didn't make this adjustment, that would mean that we would get $22 less for every student in our corporation. Good news is that they have, it's going to go through, they'll fund it, and what they'll do is they'll cap that, it shall not exceed $25 million to make up for this year. They're already anticipating that next year will be $50 million shortfall. One of the things we've heard today, this has happened multiple times in the past. Typically, after there's a shortfall like the one we're experiencing now, the following year is less. But they're anticipating right now it's going to be more. So they're already putting the language in place. The language is in place that says may address the shortfall, and this is going to change it to shall address the shortfall. So next year's a budget year anyway, and so we anticipate that they'll address it then as well, but if not, it's going to be covered in both of these bills. So, Ron, anything?
No, I mean, I think if you just glance at some articles, you could walk away with the impression that this is just a problem for the growing student population districts. It's not at all the case. It hits everybody. It's a per pupil shortfall in funding, and the reasons, I guess, will be interesting when they disaggregate them to see what it really is. We're told that charter school and private school enrollment is not down remarkably. There are just more students enrolling in public schools. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
One of the things I heard today was that they think a lot of that and that growth has been in the area of special ed students who are enrolling, who maybe have been homeschooled or through another venue are now enrolling in public schools.
And and they're identified, then the revenue loss is exacerbated because of the weighted funding formula to begin with.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Didn't we have like a $1.7 billion surplus this year?
Yeah, but this money is coming from a different So it should be covered. I mean, there's
Still,
not a
it's
problem
just
with it, yeah.
irritating.
Absolutely. Yes, for sure. Dixie, I think you were gonna.
Well, I just still don't get why they're losing these kids, why they can't count all the reports and everything that you have to turn in. Why is that?
Yeah, and that's why they
It's not
said
making
today,
any sense
with
to
the
me.
special ed population of students who have been homeschooled, and, which kind of went away from last year, if you'll remember, and this year, Senator Rotz decided not to push the issue again, but he had where they wanted to do like the debit card for services for special ed students. This year, fortunately, they backed off of that one, so let's hope, let's hope they continue to do so. It's a
Ingenious.
horrible idea. Next one I want to hit on just briefly is House Bill 1167. This one has to do with school finance and how all of that is changing with the different funds. A lot of this is really clean up to 1009 from last year. And
And that number was what?
Yeah.
it is House Bill 1167. The good side of this is that Denny Costerison from IASBO has been invited to be at the table with all of these conversations, which we feel really good about. He does an amazing job, as Karen and those of you who have heard him speak, and has been around the state forever. So he's well respected, but he feels really good about this. It's basically just fixing issues that came about after they studied more from 1009 and the ramifications from that from last year, giving them the opportunity to do that. DLGF, the State Board of Accounts, they've all been very helpful and supportful with that as they continue the discussions and planning moving forward with it. So feel good about that, because if you'll remember last year when we had the conversations about 1009, nobody really knew. And I don't think we still totally know.
Well, and actually, 1009 is actually especially when we get into the bus replacement, actually 1009 I'd like to discuss a little bit tonight, so.
Yeah.
Because it's effective January 1 of 2019.
Correct. So they're working through forms right now, what all that's going to look like, and so the good news is that we're at the table there, and our interests are being well represented. So feel a lot better about it. House Bill 1315. This one is the bill with the Gary and the Muncie takeover. I'm going to put aside the whole Gary and Muncie takeover because that's a done deal, and that doesn't. I mean, I think it's a slippery slope we're going down on with those takeovers and some of the things that are in line there that may have different ramifications. But one of the things I want to talk about with this, it provides or establishes a way for there to be financial indicators to districts, where there's going to be a committee that will look at what these warning signs will be that a corporation is in fiscal distress before it gets there. The way that Denny described this today was, if this bill had been in place, or this had been in place 10 years ago, Muncie would have never gotten to where they were, because there were all kinds of flags, all kinds of warning signs. But even with that, there were warning signs in place and state agencies in place that didn't follow through with things that should have tipped them off that there are problems. But with this, again, they've asked for either Denny or one of his board members from IASBO to serve on this committee, this council, that'll be doing this. They're going away from ranking schools. You know, at first when this came out, they wanted to rank schools similar to what they do with grades or maybe stoplight colors, or anyway, they've gone away from that, which is a really good thing. The other thing is that Denny is really working on is making sure that there's a way that they will inform the districts privately before they just come out with, because originally it was they'll just announce the list and everybody will find out at the same time. So school board administration will find out at the same time it's in the press. So with this, it sets into place where the school board president and the superintendent would both be informed of what those warning concerns are. And then there'd be, you know, one of the other things talked about was simply debt. The debt was an indicator. Well, that depends. If you're in a growing district where you're taking on debt because you need to build schools, well, debt shouldn't count against you. So there's a balance there. So, but the good thing about this bill is, again, that they're allowing people to be at the table to really have influence with that. So, any other comments or questions on that one? Senate Bill 50. is an interesting one. In light of the graduation pathways that has just gone through, in box 2 there it talks about demonstrating employability skills, but gives you all kinds of options within that. This bill, actually, one of the problems we have with it is that it's saying that requires students to have a paid employment experience while in high school.
Wow.
And senators, and they believe wholeheartedly that all these businesses across our district are gonna step up and employ all our kids. It's just not gonna happen. I'm not gonna put Jeff on the spot, but he's a business owner. If it doesn't benefit his business plan, why would he do that? So, and it's already accomplished in the graduation pathways.
Right.
So I'm not sure what the point of this is, but it has gained some traction. We hope that it'll be put into a study committee at the worst, so where they'll look at it this summer and try to go through that. Again, our big push is, we just passed the graduation pathways. Give it a chance to work.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things we wanted to push with the State Board of Ed was, with the graduation pathways, that they would give us a guarantee of 10 years to stay with it and not do anything else. You know, let us get good at it before you change,
Right.
or even, it's like, take the,
And that would even be further compounded because, you know, if they want to increase the minimum wage
I
up
was
to
getting
what,
ready to say
15
that
or
with the
something.
push for 15.
Well, what
that's-
happens to rural communities?
Is that where there's not enough places?
or we don't have enough here. I don't know.
I know,
Yeah,
but-
yeah, I don't know.
Well, and taking on a student worker is not,
No.
I mean, there's a whole,
Yeah.
set of training
Oh,
and
my
things
goodness.
that- and some places can't take them on anyway because they're under 18.
Yeah.
How do you know if the state chamber's taking a position on that?
I have not heard at this point in time, so.
Can't imagine that they be thinking that's a great idea.
Yeah, so another thing though that I want to bring to your attention is, and it's not a legislative, but it is. So one of the things that we're seeing right now is the State Board of Ed, trying to say this in the most politically correct way. Places where, and it's not just the State Board of Ed, places where when bills were passed, it would say the Department of Education will do this. So the Senate and the House are really good right now at saying, well, this is it. And then they pass it off and say, the State Board of Ed, you guys decide how it's going to be. So then when we complain about what it is, they can say, well, we didn't do that to you. That's on them. Well, in the past, wherever they've had opportunities for the Department of Education to write those, to explain what the expectations are going to be, they're moving that out and they're putting in the State Board of Education. So what it is doing is it is already starting to minimalize the Department of Ed and our state superintendent. So what we're seeing is we have an elected state superintendent for 7 more years. The term right now has 3 more years on this term, and then there'll be 1 more election cycle. After that, it will become an appointed position. So our current superintendent, Dr. McCormick, is doing a great job. She's a Republican, but she speaks her mind exactly as it is based off of what the feedback she's getting from the state superintendents, and really stands up for what's best for public education. And so what I believe, and I'm just going to say me, I'm not going to put it where other stuff is. What I believe is happening is that they're already starting to, it's a power play, to start to move, well, the State Board of Ed, because
Well, that started a couple years ago.
yes, but it's coming even around again but State Board of Ed is totally different from how a lot of things operate. So they have their own staff, and any of them. So if you guys were all on the State Board of Ed, you could go to Karen and say, Karen, I want you to do this. Rob, I want you to do this. And they would have to bring it to the next meeting. It doesn't have to be all of you concur, and then that happens. So it's really kind of a unique deal there. But as you'll remember, the State Board of Ed is appointed by certain people. Well, Governor Holcomb has the majority of the appointments. And so they line up very directly with who they were appointed by. And so they're starting to do this and see this moves. And the perfect example of that is with graduation pathways. So when I met originally with the State Board of Ed and the other 10 superintendents, one of the things we talked about was pushing that back and waiting until May, where we could all be together in a big group with principals, teachers, counselors, everybody could all be together, so that way they wouldn't misconstrue messages, and there would be transparency. So we wouldn't think, well, if Aaron's the only one taking minutes at all these meetings that are going on, he controls what's being said and what's being shared with other people. So they said, yeah, that's a great idea, we'll do that. Then they came back 2 weeks later and said, oh, we're not going to do that, we're going to go ahead. And they had said, you know, if we'll try to push out the ways to give guidance for graduation pathways, and we'll do that June, July-ish. So that was a good plan, because those kids would start to schedule in January of 19. So that way we could have them ready for the fall. Well, now that's been moved up to, they hope they're going to bring out the final one with recommendations in March. So last week on a Friday, I went to Indy and met with all of our superintendents, but then with this big group of people. There was 100 or more in this meeting. We broke up into different groups and then went through agendas and talked through different things. Well, supposedly during that time they took a survey as to how everybody in the room would like to continue. Would you like to continue with that big group meeting or go into small groups again? Everybody at my table, and there was 12 to 14 at my table, everybody wanted to do do the big groups again, so we can have that. We can hear what counselors are saying. I can hear what principals are saying, and then I can hear what teachers. So, but then the State Board of Ed comes back and says, "Oh no, the results said everybody wants small groups." So we've got a state board member who is going to call for releasing the all of the results of that survey so we can see, because we still don't believe that's happening. But then, as you guys saw, we received a Q&A about graduation pathways, and it said final copy. It didn't say draft, it said final. So what I have experienced in the last couple of months is that board members will draft up, state board members will draft up something, and they'll bring it as their recommendation to the board meeting, and it'll already be, that's the way it's going. And without discussion with the others, and if the others just are like, yeah, whatever, because of the massive schedule they have to go through, there's not discussion with it, there's not input, it's just what one person thinks, and come to find out, that's what ends up happening with it. So with the graduation pathways, that's going on. Now, if you'll remember, let you know, it's a blur right now. About 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago, the State Board of Ed came out and released the day before their board meeting that they were going to put on the accountability for schools, and they listed what they were going to put out as their accountability for schools, and I emailed them and said, the state board members, and said, you know, I'm really concerned with this because it really took out the growth piece and it went back to just passing a test again, which is the opposite of what ESSA did for all states, and the federal government guidelines gave us opportunities to really change that in a good way. And if anything, this went totally contrary to that. Well, they said, again, don't worry about that. That's something we're going to work on, and we'll get to this summer of changing that, getting it to be what it needs to be. Today they brought it back up, and they actually released what their version needs to be, or is going to be, of the school accountability. And so they had communicated with me, a board member directly communicated back with me and said, oh no, we're going to have meetings around the state and we'll gather input. We'll take a long time to get all this input and then we'll gather it. So today they released what they're doing. At the high school alone, it puts 50% of their grade based on passing a test. You know, so we're doing all this with graduation pathways about careers, but then it's all about passing a test to prove college readiness. So, I mean, it's total opposite of what they're saying. I don't understand it. So the board meetings, the community meetings that they're going to have to gain input, there's 2 next week, there's 2 the following week, and there's 1 the week after that. So they just released this today, and they're already having all these meetings. And these meetings, the locations of them are Fort Wayne, South Bend, Evansville, Madison,
Wow.
and Indianapolis for the last one, where they'll approve what they're going to do.
Wow.
Yeah.
So most of them are 2 hours or more away.
2 hours or more away, 4 to 7 in the evening. Yeah.
Wow.
With the exception of the last one, which is right before their normal board meeting, from what I understand, which is 8:30 to 11:30 in the morning. So what I'm telling you is we've got some work to do with our state board. And again, I think there's direct correlations here with with what we've seen
But it
over the
doesn't
last
sound like
several
we,
years to
doesn't
destroy
sound like
public
we
ed.
have, since they're appointed, doesn't sound like we have much influence with the state board, though.
Doesn't. But we can go down kicking and screaming, or we can just go down.
I mean,
So.
we all saw it coming, you know, when, can't even think of the last name, Ritz,
Yeah,
when they had that whole argument with Pence and stuff, he's, you know, I mean, you saw this coming.
yeah. So it is in full force right now. But, so I wish I had a more positive update. I think the legislatures right now, there's not a whole lot of damage that's gonna happen right there simply because we're coming up on an election year. But stuff with the state board is more concerning with graduation pathways and with the school accountability. And when we were doing the graduation pathways, all the senators and representatives that were part of the graduation pathway discussion just continually said to us, the accountability piece will take care of itself. Don't worry about it. Well, we've seen how that's come back, because we all said, we can't even get to have this conversation until we know what accountability looks like. You can't have one without the other. Don't worry about it. The other part, and we see what's happening with that. The other part they said was, don't worry about funding either for graduation pathways. We'll take care of that too. Well, if they're gonna follow through with that the way that they followed through with accountability,
So,
we're in a bad spot.
so it almost doesn't even sound like it's following a party line, I mean, other than the appointment.
Yeah. Which is very much a party line.
Right, right.
Yep. So, I don't know, Ron, if you've heard any,
I had an email from Julie on today's meeting, and those dates were announced. I have not seen what the rules are, though. So
Yeah. that document is attached, and I'll forward it if you guys didn't get that. Did you guys get that? From
I
Julie
did.
Slavens? I think so. But
Would it
if
come
not.
in today, or?
It was
it came
today,
this
I
afternoon,
think.
because the
Yeah.
meeting was this morning.
I've
So in
got-
there's live links to the,
I've got about 6 or 7 ISBA emails that are in my to-read file.
yeah. And if you haven't read them yet, and they're more than a week old, you probably could just
Just go to the
discard them.
most recent
Yeah,
ones.
because that's changed so quickly. So,
one semi-positive note is that the Student Publication Act that was promulgated, I think, out of good intentions, but would have had very problematic consequences for public schools, where the student publication is itself part of your educational curriculum. While it passed by a vote of 47-46, that's not a constitutional majority, so in effect, the bill failed. Now, whether it's able to be resurrected at the latter part of the session, I don't think so, but we had split voting in our local house, with Representative Ham supporting it, and surprisingly, Representative or opposing it, and Representative Sanders, I think, voted for it. But it had eye appeal, but when you started peeling the layers off that onion, it would have been very problematic in the day-to-day operations of a school publication.
Dixie, do you have anything else to add?
If anyone would like to join me next Friday morning at 8 o'clock at the Forum for Legislators at IU East.
Definitely, the 23rd, right?
Mhm.
Did you say 8?
8 o'clock.
If there's nothing else with that, I would like to then, we want to bring to you in your board update on Friday was the information regarding the bus replacement plan. We've been working on this. Karen has put together some really valuable information and some good possibilities, I think, for us in the future. We'd like to know where you are with this tonight. And if the board is comfortable, after we go through this discussion, we'd like to take a vote even, possibly, to go ahead and proceed with the plan as it is written. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Karen.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk buses. So in February, or in Friday's update, you received what I have proposed to you on a few levels. So the first being the plan itself. You asked me to take a look at what we need to do right now and what we want to do in the future from an equitable replacement per year standpoint. So that was the attachment in your board update. It is also included with the packet tonight. We're going to get to that in just a minute because a couple of columns are cut off when it printed. It didn't print everything. So we will go through that in just a minute. But I wanted to fill you in just kind of as a reminder on what we currently do. And that you will see on the screen in your packet. It's really hard to read. It is a very extensive spreadsheet. This provides us with all of the VIN numbers, the bus numbers, the type of bus that it is, and the replacement year. This is a State Board of Accounts DLGF approved form that we turn in with the budget each year, and you approve that form. It's advertised to our taxpayers. What it provides us with is an estimated cost as to replacing buses over the 12-year period. And those estimates, we have to kind of set 12 years in advance, and we have to make sure there's enough money to cover the rate of inflation, vehicular costs for all those things that you don't know about 12 years from now, and then you let it ride out for 12 years. So what we will see when we look at this plan is those costs are estimated, and they are not what our quotes tend to come in at least at the moment. And that is a good thing for us, because you always want to plan for your taxpayers to have your rate enough to cover, but not overfund. So that is where we are right now. Is there any way we can shrink that on the one that no? Okay. All right, so I guess this doesn't help a lot, but you've got two columns that are cut off, and it's unfortunate because in the actual PowerPoint itself, they're not cut off. But you can see the edges, and I've color-coded everything so you can see just by the colors what that is going to look like and what that means. So just want to give you a note. The darker colored squares are the ones that were in green on the update. And what I wanted to do was provide you with the type of buses that we have. So I worked with the bus department this morning. We went through, we reevaluated every bus to make sure what I had matched theirs. We do this a couple times a year because the spreadsheets are numerous and we want to make sure that we have it right. But the purpley color is a 72 passenger bus. The teal color is a 72 passenger with a wheelchair. The yellowish is our small white buses. They're about 14, 15 passenger. The orange is a white bus with a wheelchair lift. The green, the limey green, is an 84 passenger. And the red is a new bus for us that we're talking about right now, and that is an activity bus. And those are your extended 46 to 50 passenger big buses that we can haul sports teams on. It has equipment, storage spaces under the bus. It has all of your HVAC up on top of the bus, so your dirt isn't flowing straight into your engine and out your back. It's actually going, all your air is flowing up, and so it actually makes for some clean driving from what I hear. We are talking about that as a way to save mileage on our yellow buses because of our conference. We travel quite a bit for athletics and extracurricular activities, and that will help alleviate some of the strain on those yellow buses. Might be able to get a little bit longer life out of them, as well as those miles put on that activity bus are going to be your longer miles, so it's going to make those last a while longer as well. What I have heard, just for your information, I contacted the bus dealer yesterday and wanted to just verify that what I'm hearing is right. And on those activity buses, they are seeing anywhere from 14, 15 to more years on them. So because they aren't run every single day, all day, and because those mileage being put on that is interstate miles or longer trip miles, the utilization of those is really extended generally beyond that 12-year replacement plan on a pretty regular basis. So, just a couple of things to keep in mind.
Karen,
Yes.
what's the dark purple?
The dark purple, as we talked about just a minute ago, the darker shades are what was in green on your previous. So those were the ones, okay, sorry. So the ones that were in green and are darker shaded now are, in order to make an equitable plan, you have to push some buses. And those are your pushed,
Thank you.
okay?
On this other page, where it says types of buses, you've got D, E, and
Yep.
C. What does that mean?
They don't mean anything to you. They mean to me, the bus garage, and to Mr. Tidrow. It means the type of chassis that bus has according to vehicular standards. So D bus, actually, I'm not a bus linguist, so it has a flat front, or it might not have a flat front, but it has a type of undercarriage. So
Okay.
it's all of these fleet vehicle codes that
Okay.
have to be done for the state.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So, I would love to be the guru of that.
Hey Karen, let me
But I don't
interrupt for
have
just a second.
Yeah.
Board members, if you will go to your board docs page and hit the little refresh up at the top. Kim just posted this on board docs, so then you can see like this, so you can see all the colors. So it's the little circular thing right next to the house. If you just go there and hit refresh, your screen will go out and come back on. Click on the work session agenda again. View the agenda, and then you should be able to get down there. It's attached.
Mine went away.
Do we have a particular preference for buses, type, manufacturer?
We do, actually. So thank you, Kim.
So,
What we like, or what we have found to be successful for us and efficient and long-lasting, are Thomas buses. We do not currently have all Thomas buses, as you'll see in the current plan. We are trying to get there because we have found that they are doing us some real good. They are strong, long-lasting buses that they're getting the job done. So that's what I've been recommended when we
How about
ask.
style
A style of bus.
versus the traditional
Oh, she
versus
did put
the,
it on
I mean, we have several.
she's got skills.
Flat nose.
Yeah.
Flat nose, yeah. I think it depends on the engine, because what I hear is, oh, that year was horrible. It might not be the style was horrible, that year was horrible, because they may have changed or tweaked some pieces to that entire bus. There are some things that make one type of bus better than another type. And like I said, I have to go to Mr. Thomas and Mrs. Darren-Galsky at the bus garage to get me that, because they run them every day. And we don't have that in our,
And then lastly, does it make more sense to have more wheelchair buses from a flexibility standpoint than what you're asking for?
okay. So what we do, yes and no, because you can only run so many routes with a wheelchair bus, and they cut back on the number of students on the bus. So if you might need more wheelchairs, but you can't carry everybody else with it. So we've talked about needing, and it's a serious need to add one more this year. Do we need more than one? Not at this time. However, each year we take a look at those students, because what we don't know is who is coming next year. Or are we going to get a big influx of students? Mr. Terrell spoke before about the special education dynamics that are happening, and they think that maybe that's part of why these changes are happening with funding. We're seeing it here, that our student population of special education students are growing, and they're more severely needed kids. So that means more transport of special cases. And so I would say that what we're doing tonight is probably going to change in the next couple years, because we may need another one that we don't know now that we may need in the future. We are also looking and evaluating every year, because I know this has been on our radar at least for the last 2 to 3 years. looking at, do we really get big buses with lifts, or do we look at some small yellow buses with lifts? Is it possible? Is it economical? Is it efficient? So we are looking at that too, and it is possible we could move to that direction, I would say, sooner rather than later in some cases. So what I'll tell you is this is a proposed plan for today. It is always on the move with the need for kids.
So just for instance, how many, just roughly 84 passenger buses do we have? Several?
We have 8 right now.
Okay, and
We are
what kind
on
of
the road every
capacity
day.
are they running at, I guess is the true question.
What?
What's the like, are they 90% full? Okay.
Yeah, the roads that have those buses on them need them.
Okay. I mean,
If
yeah,
their
that's-
elementary doesn't, then secondary does.
That's where I was going.
And it's kind of misleading, because 84 passenger bus will not fit 84 high school
Correct.
kids.
Right.
It
Right.
will not.
You're talking
There were
3.
66
84
passengers when I was in school. I don't
Yeah,
know what happened.
84 means 3 per seat all the way back, which clearly it's more like 56, 2 per seat, so.
Thank you.
Yep. And what you will notice, this was something I learned today that, and I put it in the proposed, just to be thinking about, because if we do have, a shortage of maybe drivers, or we need to reroute, maybe we need to look at an extra 84. And that's something that we have proposed in the 2020 plan, changing from a 72 to an 84. I have heard rumors that there are even bigger buses than 84, but I think we have to look at logistics and our street maps, and I don't know if that would even be feasible in some neighborhoods for us to look at that. So this is what has worked for us right now. There are other options, but we would have to explore those with some really serious data to make sure that we could even work them.
Although by 2022, every street will have been ripped up and rebuilt.
That's true.
so we probably won't have
That's
any
true.
Yeah, but they'll be
construction for
starting
10
again.
years.
We might be running
Wow,
small
you're
buses
optimistic.
everywhere.
I was looking at by this time next year.
Yeah.
The interesting residual from us moving our walk boundaries out is that buses can go in a smaller radius and collect a lot more kids a lot quicker. And so that's why we've had that conversation about longer, bigger buses, because within 30 minutes, they can fill up a bus. Because you're having kids walk to stops. And so it's an interesting residual of that, especially in some of our more densely populated areas. I can send a bus in the Fairview neighborhood and fill it up within probably 15 to 20 minutes.
Well, and then we're gonna have, I don't know where we're gonna be with grade configuration.
Correct. That's the other thing.
So that's the other big.
Yep. So, this, like I said, is this year. The other piece to it is something Mr. Slifer said earlier. We have the new bill that we don't know what that looks like, but we have to plan for this year. So we got to make this year happen, and then we'll make adjustments as we go moving forward. But I do think that it was necessary that we look at it. If it's possible to spread it out, we've got to look at it. And if we need to start working on that now in order to make that happen with whatever changes may come, I think that we're in a good position to keep doing that.
The activity buses do have a really, the potential, because as we said, with the change in the boundaries, there are more of the 84 passenger buses on the road every day. And so we're about to get, next year, I think all the sub 84s will be going away.
Going out.
And so what the activity buses could do is keep those on their routes and send the activity buses out on the highway so that you're not having to put the sub buses out on the routes all the time, so.
And that creates a lot of strain and change, not only for the drivers, but the kids.
Exactly.
So I think that we'll see some true benefits that we may not even realize yet with those
We have a great
activity
system for
buses.
subbing, but it
Yeah.
does, there's a lot of logistical
Yeah.
stuff that has to.
So when we look at this year, right now, we have on slate to replace 9 buses. We knew that we have some extras sitting on the lot due to population changes. We don't have the need for as many buses as we have had in the past.
which provides us the opportunity this year to look at how do we continue to utilize our bus replacement plan and for maximum efficiencies and things that can make us work better. When we looked at that, the activity buses were the answer we were looking for. A lot of it being those 84 passenger issues, the other part being that we really could have some true capacity for those activities, that it will just help a number of things. There's storage. That's huge. You don't have storage on a school bus. So then you're taking more buses because you need more space for equipment. That may completely lessen the need for that. We do not have the charter bus anymore. It did not work out for us. In the end, it was costing us more than it was being economical to run it. So we don't have that option anymore. We need to look at something to help us get those kids where they need to go without affecting our routine routes for busing day to day. So when we did that, we know the price for an activity bus is significantly higher than a school bus, and that is logistics, that is a little bit of different options required by the state. There's also the fact that you have to do more detail work on paint. You want to make sure that you have everything covered that those kids may need on the bus because they're on there after hours. We've looked at some options for USB. We've looked at options for DVDs so that they can run training tapes if they need to. We've looked at a number of options. We have not determined that all of those are going to happen because we do want to keep the price within reason. But you have to look at those things because they're running those buses on weekends and nights. They're not running during the school day, and they still have to get homework and things done. And with the move to a digital environment, we wanted to make sure that we offered what we could to help those kids continue success with that. So in looking at that, to make that happen, we were going to reduce our fleet by 2. According to the DLGF, you can reduce your fleet, but you have to keep your costs the same. This is going to do that for us. You don't want to reduce your fleet and reduce your costs because that will reduce your max levy and it will create all these other triggers that we don't really want to do, and it'll decrease our tax base and collection. So that's something that we worked very hard on to make sure we were still going to hit that mark, that we were still going to do what the school needed us to do, what the corporation has been doing as a board to make sure that everything is financially possible and within the tax base that we have. Are there any questions on this plan? You'll see 2030 we start over. The boxes in yellow give us some room. If there's a year where things are lean, we can push something else. So I feel good about this plan. I think that it's doable. I think I've talked to the bus department and they feel like it's completely doable. We're pushing buses no more than 1 year, and they feel like that's absolutely acceptable with the fleet that we have now should we need it. Any questions on that?
Karen, I thank you for your creativity with this. I know you worked long and hard on it, and I think it's a good approach.
Karen, I know you're, like you said, you're not a self-proclaimed bus expert, but you're strong, or you're striving to get there.
Did you say that? Were you striving?
I've had to learn it.
You're going to get there before you realize it. The activity buses, I know there's several different options, and you alluded to the USBs and the DVD players. Also, there's a seating option, if I'm correct, that it's either a bench seat or coach seating.
We're looking at not bench seating.
The coach seating, similar to a tour bus.
A little bit.
It's a little more comfortable ride.
A little bit. It's not cushy
Right.
because they're still very easy to clean and nice to be easy to you know.
But it's a better backrest and things like that.
There's a little bit more room in the seats, so your big
Right.
football players are going to have just a little bit more room than they would in that tight
Right.
bus.
And what kind of cost difference is that between the cushion or the bench seats versus the
Not much.
coach seat? Not much.
Mm-mm.
Does it take the seating capacity down?
Yes. Yes. I don't know about substantially because you wouldn't fit kids in the seat
No, but
anyway.
I think they're spaced
I
back a
think
little
the
bit further, isn't it?
the
With
technic-
a little more leg room.
No, because they stop, the leg room is about the same.
Okay.
It's the fact that, are you really getting 3 in a seat? because they're gonna report it as 3 and a C on a
Sure,
bench.
okay,
So I think that the actual capacity is about the same.
okay.
It's just the reporting capacity.
Brad, having
Does that
been
make
on them,
sense?
there is more legroom than.
Right, that's,
Or
yeah.
is it like a
okay.
44-seat?
It's a
Activity bus?
46. It's the size of a 96 passenger bus, but you're seating 46. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I did a little looking online. You know, there are used activity buses, late model. I mean, have you thought about that at all?
We've thought about it, but when you buy a used bus on the replacement plan, you have to go through totally separate inspections. And it creates some dynamics in our taxing plan that is just a little different than what we're used to, which is fine. Different isn't bad. But if we're gonna go this route, if we can do the two for one deal, then we can make it happen without having to go used,
You still said we're short cash though.
right?
And if you can save 120,000 on the 2 activity buses,
That's something we could talk about.
seems like it would.
You
kind
have
of-
to, now you have to remember that we have to strip the bus of the paint and repaint. So even though we might get it for that, we're gonna have probably double in a paint job than
Why do
we
you have
would
to
on
do
a
that?
new one.
Why would you have to do that?
I don't want one that says
Somebody else's school.
Trojans,
Yeah.
Well, I mean, a lot of them are just plain, white or black or,
maybe.
I mean, it depends.
Maybe.
You'd have to get with a dealer.
You'd have to look
See what's
pretty
available.
hard. I'm happy to do that, but we're running tight on some
But
time.
they are out there, and
They
for
are.
a year or two and 50,000 miles, you can be well under $100,000.
I'm happy to look, but my time is tight, and if we want to look at that, then maybe we look at, I just need to know if that's
I
the
don't
will
know
of
if
the board.
would be comfortable with that or not. I just,
Well,
I think I would be more comfortable with the activity buses going used than a yellow bus. I think they get a lot of use. and-
The activity buses are gonna be primarily for our football and basketball teams, right?
Not-
Track, swimming.
Track, swimming, all of them, really.
So,
Band.
Baseball,
would it-
band, yeah.
So it's gonna be used once or twice
Fire.
a week.
Oh, no, it'll be, I think. We're making trips to Lafayette during the week. I mean, a couple times, some weeks, so. Where we have 8th grade teams even going, Jennifer can speak to it. Her daughter there and I got home at like 9:30 at night from a trip to
Greenfield,
Greenfield.
they're
I
in
mean, so-
Anderson tonight.
Yeah, so they're Anderson tonight, which is an hour and 20 on a bus, you know.
His
An
beach
hour
team
at
was
least, so.
Saturday morning.
So, and the other problem is, so if we go used, and then what mechanical issues are we bringing in? And these are buses that are out at 4 a.m. in the morning, last Saturday, or at running back from Logansport at midnight, you know, so I'd be nervous about what we're bringing on. At least if
Well, I
it's
think-
ours, we know
I think
what it
John was
is.
talking like 2017, 2016,
Yeah.
not talking 12 years old. But
I
anyway,
understand.
I had actually looked at this as well on Sunday, and I just meant to send it to you, and then never got around to it. But when I was looking at, I guess I was looking more from a cash point of view. I understand it makes sense that now if you're going to get the activity bus and we're going to replace 4 buses, then, you know, that part of it makes sense to me. The only part is worthy of the discussion is whether we want to do the other. But when I was looking at your plan, your numbers now are a little higher than what they were as far as, well, what I meant is we have more cash, a little bit of.
I got the preliminary budget numbers.
Ah,
I didn't have that before.
Because-
You have to be very conservative when you have no
Because-
idea what you're gonna get.
well, because the couple of things that I was looking at is I'm not opposed to doing the leases. Especially when I saw the lease cost is 2.7%. I mean, it's really cheap money. If I had calculated it right, we were looking at, and I realized it was a 5-year term, and, you know, of course, I think you could probably, if we looked hard enough, we could probably find leases, but let's just go with the assumption that if we lease the bus, we buy it at the end, and we have.
Well,
it
you
for the
have
full-
to.
For the full 12 years.
It's not an option. You have to buy it after the 5 years.
Well, there was some websites that I looked at that had some that you could lease. for-
Government entity leases. Ours are a little different. We have some different rules to follow. I actually have an actual calculator from the place we buy buses, from the bank that is utilized for these. The difference in cost is $60,874 more that you would pay in the lease interest over the 5 years
Well, it's a little different than what
on
my.
5 buses.
Okay.
on
okay.
5 buses.
Okay, yeah, I was looking at it on a per bus, because I was looking at $23,000 a year per lease for 5 years per one bus.
Okay.
But
It's a little
if we
more.
purchase the bus, you're looking at $111,000. I was just looking at the cost. There was about a $30,000, I came up with about a $30,000 increase. And I'm not, we don't have to argue about the pennies. I'm just talking about concept right
Yeah.
now. So when I was taking a look at it, I'm thinking, well, 2.7 is fairly decent money. So I had, same like you, I'd actually had a plan calculated out till 2023. But your plan works fine. I like your plan. I mean, would we still be pulling, I mean, it's a lot of different areas to go into, but I mean, so do you still plan on pulling the $132,000 out of the rainy day fund for the shortfall?
Well, that's what I'm asking you tonight. So if we can move to the next slide, we'll go over the costs really quick. And what I will tell you is these costs do not include trade-in values. We do have trade-in values that will happen. They're not significant, but they do offset a little bit. So for an activity bus, it's $166. For a 72 passenger with a lift, it's $116. For a 72 passenger, it's $109. These are our actual quotes from the vendor. We would purchase through the Wilson Service Center purchasing agreement that was bid out through the state. So we meet all state bidding requirements, feel good about it. I've seen all the documents. I've passed those on to Mr. Terrell and Mr. Cross. They are very thorough. And so that's where we got our pricing. For the 2018 plan, and this is actually less than I thought it might have been, so I was actually kind of pleased with this number. It's $874,265 if we replace 472 passengers, 172 passenger with a lift, which is a change. So we're going to go from a 72 with no lift to a 72 with a lift, and 2 activity buses. We can change this plan. We are currently replacing 9 72 passenger buses. If we are uncomfortable with 2 activity buses, we want to see how it goes with 1, we can get another 72 and do the next activity next year. That's a possibility. It's just up to you. So
The charter seat.
I just want to make sure that whatever we do, we all are there and we can get it done quickly, because what I will tell you about delivery on these buses, we are already at the point where we're looking at best September, October. So every day that I delay, it pushes it out probably a week. And the activity buses, I've already been told, are December delivery if we get them in by the end of this month. So we need them. We need them to get going. But we're a year out on make because they have such a demand right now. So that's why we need to make decisions tonight.
There's a reason why there's a demand for them.
There is.
Because it's a good option.
It is. It really is changing the dynamic of transportation.
There's several of our schools in our conference that have them already.
Yeah, and I have had a number of schools call me who have seen our small bus. How did you do it? I want to know where you went, because it's making so much sense to be able to utilize those buses in so many different ways rather than just the yellow bus.
For
And
small
and some of
teams.
those restrictions that go with it. Okay, so can we move to the next slide, please? So our projected revenue, I feel pretty good about this revenue. Last year, our property tax collections were at about 71%. So that's where I went this year. I'm really hoping that circuit breaker doesn't go more than that, because then we're looking at 30, and I don't want to hit that mark. I don't have a choice on the matter, but I'm really hoping. So I ran it at the same as last year. Estimated revenue with our cash balance, we're looking at 742. We have to determine, are we going to wipe it out, because next year we have to replace buses too. So we want to make sure that whatever we're doing, we're watching that as we move through this process. So, next slide, please. So we have work to do. Our estimated needs are $874,265. Estimated revenue in the bus replacement fund only at $742,213 leaves the shortfall of $132. We have a couple of options to do that. However, they are only appropriated in one way. So, the appropriation in the bus replacement plan hovers right around that 742 mark. I already know that. It's on my projected budget. They're not changing it again, and that's because I went back and begged for it. They gave me 500, and I said, wait. I've got cash balance. I know I've got the revenue coming. Give me 742. So they gave me close to it. Now, that is just appropriation. So what I know is it doesn't mean that the cash may already come in there. I just think it's going to come close. So that 132 is legit. I think that we need to look at the fact that the only other place we have appropriated for buses is rainy day. Does it mean we have to use exactly rainy day funds? You can transfer to rainy day from another fund, should you determine to. If you would like to make that difference from a specific fund, you can do that as long as it's not a debt fund. So if we know that we want to plan for transportation fund to make sure we have a cash balance in there every year of $150,000, we can try to hit that target, because right now we are working our transportation to make sure it is a monthly, if not weekly, conversation with student transit to make sure we're hitting those targets on those amounts so that we aren't going over. If you say we need $150,000 in cash in transportation at the end of every year, that's what I'm going to be at. And we're going to make it happen. It might mean we have to change some things, but if we get there, that's what we'll do. And then you know you want to transfer every year $150,000 to rainy day. That might be how we have to do it. But that option is there. So, the only thing about that is you can't buy buses from anywhere except the bus replacement fund, the rainy day fund, and if I would write it in the general fund, which we don't have right now. So you only have 3 options for appropriation to buy it. Does everyone understand that difference? Okay.
Well, that's what concerns me. That's why I actually spent a lot of time researching the 1009, because this is the last year that we actually have to report to the DLG our bus replacement plan.
Maybe. I'll say maybe, because
Well,
they're working on some language in that other legislation that's coming that it might not go away.
Well,
That's
but
just what I know.
the way the plan that I have, I'm really worried about House Bill 1009. I think it's going to change. It's going to. The state shortfalls are going to go away. I really believe that when they go in to create the educational fund, we're going to see, I don't know, I want to throw $1 million. I mean, we're going to see a lot of expenses right now that we have in the general fund that will, when it's done, won't be in the educational fund. They're going to move over to the operational side.
Right.
And we're talking, all your salary for the tech departments, and I mean, we're talking, it's changing quite a bit.
They are working through some of that right now with that bill to help clean some of that up, though.
So, and then I noticed that in the beginning of the first quarter next year, they're talking about being able to transfer for that period of 3 months between the two. between the educational and operational.
I think that it's longer than the 3 months because they've told us that you're looking at monthly transfers of revenue between. That's just what they've preliminarily told us, because you can't just say 3 months and you're done, because the revenue comes on a monthly basis.
So whatever version, there's gonna be, there's gonna be.
Right.
But I think we're gonna be, I'm just worried about being stuck. And as I read through the different stuff, I'm more of, like one of the things that we had talked about last year when we originally talked about the bus replacement plan is we had some extra general fund balance. We were gonna sweep that to rainy day, and then when we did the salary increase, we backed that off. And as I look at the end of this year, I'm thinking, wow, maybe as a protection, we would be wise to sweep all of those funds that have any balance to rainy day. So I'm just really limited. I just would like to protect and build rainy day as much as possible until we get into seeing how the budget works through, whether it's 1009 or 1169 or, I just, because I'm worried that we're gonna, all of a sudden, we're gonna have, I just haven't been able to look at how the worksheets would, because so much money is gonna shift between both sides.
Well, and it hasn't even been determined yet.
So.
So I can't even speak to that because I don't even know what it's gonna look like. And it could go, I could see 20 different ways of it going right now.
When you
I just
research
have
it,
no
they
idea.
give you 20 different ways.
Right.
But that's why, in the beginning, that's why last year I said I'm not a fan of spending the rainy day fund, especially if we're going through this master planning. If we could build our rainy day fund balance up to 6 million or 7 million, I'd be happy with that, because then we would have the latitude to move and shift that money, even going through master plan. You kind of want to look at rainy day funds expenditures as one-time expenditures. So construction on a building is a good example of that. Buying a bus is, as long as it's not as far as the plan, is an example.
Yeah. The issue is we do kind of have to move forward with this year's, not kind of, we do have to move forward with this year's, one way or the other. The other thing that I think is important to note is the 9 buses that are on the list this year need to go.
Yeah, yeah.
They need to go. This is that purchase, that big purchase of the model that just wasn't good.
Yeah,
And have cost the district more in maintenance. And in fact, with the way that we've shifted, and the changes we've made in transportation, we've been able to keep them off the road on a daily, but they still have to be available for subs, and they just need to go away.
So
And I'm not proposing that we change what we buy. All I'm proposing is we put the plan together so we don't have to spend rainy day money to do it.
Well, and I think that going forward, there's more of a chance of that than maybe this year.
Well, and we do,
Based on your plan to sort of scoot some, which I think is, and with these going away, those that are left, the idea of them being around longer than 12 doesn't bother us as much. This group can't stick around.
But if we have to make, and this is just where I'm at, if we have to, let's say we need $150,000 to, that's what we're gonna do. But we're talking about an activity bus is $155,000. If I could go lease that activity bus for $30,000, still plan on purchasing it, still plan on having it at 2.7% interest, I'm willing to spend 2.7% interest and protect the rainy day fund. That's what I'm saying. I'm not against the plan.
I'll tell you what my concern with leasing is, because I think that when I look at the dollars, when I just talk about it right now, it looks fantastic. What I'm afraid of is the fact that we have circuit breakers at almost 30%, and I don't know what next year will bring. So if I lease vehicles, and I know I have that lease added to my next year's plan, it makes this year great. Doesn't help next year because now I have to do something with all those buses that I need to replace, and I have a lease payment on top of it. I'm okay with that if we know
Right.
that we're gonna hit that target every year.
That's why
But
I
I
would-
don't know.
I had
And-
done if we had carried that lease out for 5 years, it drops off, and I had
Right.
done it out to, our next big problem is 2022.
Right. And you know, I totally agree. I think that right now it looks great. And if I could guarantee that I didn't have to sweat circuit breakers, I would say that. And I think it might be an option if we determine that leasing might be a long term for us, that we're going to do it a lot. Do I think that's good? I don't know. $60,000 on top of the price is not, to me, it's a substantial sum on 5 buses. And we think about we have 60. So you multiply that 12 times, that's a substantial sum if we decided to lease everything. And that, I'm just looking at the maximum, what it would look like. Now, you know, if that's the way we want to go, it is substantial savings on an annual basis if you strictly lease. It's when and you can mix and all that. I mean, that's
Well, that's why I
lots
was
of
trying to
schools do
understand
it.
House Bill 1009 a little better understanding, because then next year, with it all being in operational funds,
Mhm.
even though you have to have the schedules published within the corporation, you're not tied to, you're not tied to.
You're not, but our max levy isn't changing. That I know.
Right.
So
but
I'm
but
still
the-
only
but
gonna
the
get
ex-
enough
But the expenditures.
replace
The
112.
expenditures are all gonna be within the one fund.
Yeah.
And then what I was trying to figure out with, with our pension bond coming off,
Mhm.
and that's gonna also, add, I'm guessing on the operational side, 1.7, 1.8 million.
Mhm.
So we're looking at 2 years for that. So if we had to accelerate a lease payment at that time,
Maybe,
It
but
could
they
be
haven't
done.
told us we can even do that yet. The way I've heard it is there's a really good likelihood not much changes except your account numbers. So I'm not gonna run on the theory that it's gonna be free to do what, it's gonna have flexibility for a cash balance. It's probably not gonna be as flexible as we hope it will be when it comes down to the nuts and bolts and the budgets. I don't know, it'll surprise me if
Well,
we
that's-
get that kind of freedom.
I totally understand, it's a guess.
Right.
It's,
Yeah, I think,
Well, and I'm thinking, we're not gonna have any buses at all if we don't make a decision.
that's my concern too. I think you've done a good job
And you also
there.
said that we can be flexible in the coming years. You know, as we, and maybe something will be finalized, a little bit more concrete by then.
I would guess that when I have to come to you with the budget in August, it's gonna look totally different. And it may be that this was not an unnecessary conversation, because we need to have the conversation about the cash. But it'll be, oh, well, now we have to start again. I don't know. But I think that, for this year, we need to do what we decide we need to do. And then, future years, we make happen as we need to. But I like the idea of having the 4 spaces for buses later on in the plan, because it gives us some room. If something isn't working well, then we know we gotta look at that. Because what I do know is this is my best case cash. After this year, if we use our cash balance, we're talking $420,000 a year that we'll get in cash in bus replacement. We have to replace 5 buses on $400,000. Some years that'll work for the small buses. Other years, we're not gonna have it. So I think that the key will be the maintenance of the cash. Where are we gonna put it? Where are we gonna get it? Is it from general fund that we set a target amount to go to sweep, as you said?
The general fund won't be there.
Well,
Oh, no.
right, but we also know we still have to have the cash. And the education fund, as far as I know, can still be used for anything needed at the school. So that would be buses if we need to.
So your
So-
recommendation is
Right there.
back which is, the se- however many, now I've lost track.
Right, 7
4
buses.
72s, 1 with a lift, and 2 activity.
Based on conversations with the busing department, student transit, Mr. Tidrow, Mr. Terrell, the athletics department, the music department, this is what we really need to make significant updates and movement in the
And
transportation.
at least at this moment, regarding funding, the shortfall would be from,
It would be from circuit breakers, because we're not gonna collect everything that our tax rate brings in. It's also from the fact that our plan is heavy this year, and we're gonna make movement on that so that it doesn't happen again.
but the overage would come from where? Where do you
It has to
recommend?
come technically from the rainy day fund, because it's the only place we have appropriation for it. Does the actual dollars have to be directly from what's in there right now? No, you can transfer funds from general fund or from transportation, because there are cash balances sitting there. Do I recommend general fund? No, we need those. But transportation does have cash balance. You could transfer to rainy day to cover that difference.
And that's what that was where I was gonna be at.
And
I would
we'll
like
need
to-
action to do that, and we can do that once we have the invoices and ready to make payment. We don't have to do that tonight.
But tonight, what you'd like for us to do is to entertain a motion to proceed with this year's bus replacement as you
Yes.
have presented it.
Yes.
Could I entertain that motion? Do I have a motion to proceed with this year's bus replacement? as
I'll make
presented?
the motion.
Yep, okay. I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. I hate to ask this question, any further discussion?
Well,
Very
not-
odd. I appreciate the
only
work.
further discussion would be when we have the,
Correct.
when we have the funding.
Right, right. When
A
we-
lot of
when
work,
we-
thank you, Karen.
Yeah, and I appreciate the work that went into the, because we all wanted to be able to even out the following years. And I think if we all work together on that, that is going to be possible, even though we weren't really done some favors previously with those heavy years. So I appreciate that. I think you've done a good job.
And we have to do that.
We have to, right, exactly. And I think this is great. I think you guys have done a really good job altogether on that. And I think that there are some things even forward that we aren't fully aware of that I think will help that as well. Just again, populations and where the kids are living, and we may be able to even be more creative with that. So I appreciate that, so. All those in favor of proceeding with the bus replacement plan this year as presented, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, very good.
Thank you so much.
Brad, did you make
It's
the motion?
Aaron.
That was Aaron and
Aaron.
Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you so much.
You started to, but Aaron went.
No, I found that discussion very valuable.
It was good. It's a complicated situation, and it's one we've been dealing with for a long time.
Yeah, it
really
needed to be done.
handle on
But we need to keep this in mind when it comes to grade configuration. You know, we're this short right now. Okay.
All right.
Preview.
Preview of upcoming
meetings that I'd
meetings.
like to remind you of. So tomorrow, we're at test at 6. On the 20th, we're at Morrison Reeves Library at 11:30 with a community meeting. Also on the 20th, we are here at the high school in the conference room down by the cafeteria at 6. And one other thing that I want to bring to your attention, with the way the calendar rolled this year, we just realized that the week of spring break, we have a board meeting scheduled. Now, that's problematic. I'm going to be at a conference in Boston. Chuck's on vacation that week. Disney World.
Disney.
Visiting my daughter.
I'll be out of town.
So, there's a couple of options that we can talk through as a board, whether that is to have back-to-back week meetings, so 2 weeks in a row, if we just look at canceling that meeting, which would be fine. But we can entertain that, just so you guys are thinking about that coming up.
Yeah, look for more on that, but it'll be either a combination, I would assume, we're either gonna move it or we're gonna combine it with the other one, so. But
It's
for
gonna depend on how much master planning discussions
Exactly.
involved. so.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think our transportation cost is gonna go up with the master plan.
Maybe.
See what happens with grade configuration. That'll be a big one, so. So don't, please be sure to get the other community meetings on your calendar. I know some of you had some conflicts initially, but we've had a really good attendance percentage so that we can all be there to hear as much as possible. And we've done really well, so I appreciate that. I know it's hard to get them in, trust me. But that's a good thing, so let's keep it up. I think we're at our press conference. Okay. All right, how about our bell ringer?
Okay, our bell ringer, I want to highlight one of the reasons why we need activity buses. Our Red Devil speech team at the high school, which has, over the last 2 years, has just really blossomed.
Definitely.
This past weekend, they traveled to Logansport, and they took second out of 28 schools.
Wow, that's awesome.
19 out of 28 entries broke past the preliminary rounds, and then there were champions beyond that. And one of our students even qualified for the Nationals in Congress. And I'm going to admit, I'm not sure what Nationals in Congress means, but it sounds pretty doggone impressive.
Impressive. I was gonna say the same thing.
And they're super dedicated because they left for that match at 4 a.m. So,
Wow.
just saying.
That's 4, as in right before 5 and short after 3.
And after
And
3.
Mr. Tidrow got up and checked the roads
And
for
I
us,
set
so
my
we
alarm too.
appreciate it.
That's awesome.
So,
You should already be at work at 4 o'clock.
on a Saturday morning?
That's Saturday morning, man.
That's
He
dedication.
was Monday through Thursday.
But they are doing great, so that's awesome. Thank you so much, everyone.